I did the typing of answers for almost a year, and about maybe 3/4 of the way through that year, I went off to business school. I went to the University of Chicago.
He basically made a proposal to Joel, saying, you don't want to handle, all these hint calls and stuff. Why don't you let me form a separate company called the Zork Users Group, and I'll handle all that stuff, and I'll pay a royalty to Infocom. And so in addition to inventing the Invisiclues hint booklets, he also sold maps, he sold t-shirt, iron-ons, he sold bumper stickers, he sold pins, buttons, probably other things that I'm forgetting now, and built that up into quite a business. And part of the deal of him coming back to Infocom was Infocom buying the Zork Users Group and then taking, all that stuff internally.
I continued under Zork Users Group providing the service, but as a student, I had a fair amount of other things going on, and I was finding that it was taking more and more and more of my time to answer these questions. I could do it fast enough that it was fairly lucrative, but it was still getting to be a little tedious. So it also was clear that it was going to keep growing. So I was, trying to think of a way to do a clue book that would not spoil the game for people. I didn't want to give anything away that you didn't want to know. Didn't want you in the course of perusing the book to see something that would spoil a problem for you, or spoil part of the game for you. That was one part of it. Another part of it, though, is I was really concerned that I'd do all this work and then it would just get Xeroxed and passed along or whatever. So I wanted something that was kind of hard to pirate. And I looked at a bunch of things. I looked at like scratch off, like they use for the state lotteries. I looked at the colored glasses, where you use the multiple colors of ink and you can't see the answer, but then you'd still be able to see other answers on the same page. So there were possibilities of creating a little window that you slide over the question on the page and that kind of thing. I was at a party back in my hometown with some friends of mine from high school days, and one of them had gone to pharmacy school at University of Wisconsin. And I was describing that, I was trying to create these booklets and trying to come up with an answer. And he said, well, why don't you use invisible ink? And now I actually had been printing for several years as a side job prior to Infocom. And I thought I knew a fair amount about printing. I'd never even heard of invisible ink. So I quizzed him on it, and he said, well, in pharmacy school, one of our professors used to do tests where he would give you the ability to develop the answer, so you knew as you were taking the test whether you got things right or wrong, and you actually learned in the process. And the more, like multiple choice, the more choices you had to develop before you finally got to the right one, kind of the worse your score on that question. So it sounded like an intriguing idea, and I started calling around. I called printing journals, I called printing companies, I called, you name it, I called them, and everybody thought I was nuts when I asked them about this invisible ink process. And so I called him back and said, can you give me any more information about, even the professor's name? Maybe he can tell me where I can find this. So I ended up talking to the professor's assistant, and she went and found the box that the tests came in or whatever, and read something off the label that it was from A.B. Dick. And I called them and finally got through to somebody who didn't think I was a nut. And he said, oh, do you mean our latent image process? And I said, if that's what you call it. And so they finally put me through to somebody who knew what they were talking about, and I found a printer that actually had the technology and created the Invisiclues books.